The fall of the galaxy. The void of space erupted with light as another Alliance cruiser dissolved into particles of superheated plasma. Commander Eli Voss watched from the command deck of the Unbroken Dawn, his weathered face illuminated by the distant explosion. That was the third vessel they'd lost in the last hour. "Tactical assessment," he said, his voice unnaturally calm for someone watching his fleet disintegrate. Lieutenant Nira, an Altarian with scaled blue skin that shimmered under the emergency lights, responded without taking her 6 eyes off her console. "The Hivborn have broken through sectors 7 and 9. We've lost contact with the Centauri outpost and the Rigelian defense platform. The 7th Fleet is in full retreat." Voss closed his eyes briefly. 3 months ago, the Alliance had controlled 27 star systems. Now they were down to 4. The Hiveborn Collective had appeared from the depths of uncharted space 18 months earlier with technology unlike anything they'd ever encountered. Organic ships that adapted to Alliance weapons, drones that learned from every encounter, and worst of all, a hive intelligence that anticipated their every strategy. "Commander," came a new voice, breaking through Voss's thoughts. It was Communications Officer Torbil, a Meridian whose translucent skin showed the rapid pulsing of his 3 hearts. "Priority transmission from Alliance Command." Voss nodded, and the holographic display in the center of the bridge flickered to life. The face of High Admiral Zakara appeared, her usually immaculate uniform disheveled, a dried streak of emerald blood visible along her temple. "Commander Voss," she began, her voice strained. "Proxima Centauri has fallen. The Hiveborn breached our quantum barriers and overwhelmed the colony." She paused, visibly gathering herself. 17 billion souls. Gone. The bridge fell silent. Proxima had been their largest refugee center. 17 billion civilians from a dozen species, all believed to be safe behind the most advanced defenses the Alliance could construct. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Voss asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. "All remaining ships are to fall back to Haven. The Council is invoking Protocol Omega. This is no longer about winning, Commander. It's about surviving long enough to find another way." Protocol Omega, the last resort contingency plan, never before activated in the Alliance's 10,000-year history. It meant they had officially lost the war. Whatever was left of their civilization would retreat to Haven, their final fortress world, while the Council explored options too desperate to consider until now. "We'll provide cover for the evacuation ships," Voss said. "Dawn out." The transmission ended, and Voss turned to his crew. "Set course for Haven. Maximum burn. Alert all ships in our battle group to form a defensive perimeter around the civilian transports." As the Unbroken Dawn changed course, Voss gazed once more at the battlefield. The Hiveborn ships moved with unsettling coordination, like the tentacles of some vast cosmic predator. They were learning, adapting, evolving with each engagement. The Alliance had thrown everything they had at them: antimatter warheads, quantum disruptors, gravimetric lances. And the Hiveborn had absorbed it all, becoming stronger. 3 days later, Voss stood in Haven's central spire, looking out over the last great city of the Alliance. Massive energy shields glimmered overhead, protecting the metropolis that housed representatives from over 200 species. Once a symbol of cooperation and progress, Haven was now little more than an elaborate tomb. The council chamber was in chaos when he arrived. Representatives shouted over one another, their translators struggling to keep pace with the panic. Silence. The voice of Councillor Xan, an ancient draconian whose scales had long since faded from vibrant red to a dull gray, cut through the noise. As the eldest member of the council, his authority was one of the few things still respected. "We cannot let fear rule us in our final hours." Final hours. A Volari delegate with feathered quills that bristled with agitation stepped forward. "Is that what we've come to? Accepting extinction?" "We've lost 87% of our territory," replied Admiral Zakara, who stood near the central dais. "Our remaining fleets are outnumbered 20 to 1. The Hiveborn will reach Haven within 2 standard weeks. Then we negotiate, suggested a crystalline entity that hovered above its designated platform. Admiral Zakara shook her head. The Hiveborn don't communicate. They consume. Every attempt at contact has been met with immediate aggression. There must be something we haven't tried, Counselor Xan said, his ancient eyes scanning the room. Some weapon, some strategy. An uncomfortable silence descended upon the chamber. Then, from the shadows near the back wall, a new voice spoke. There is one option we haven't considered. All eyes turned to the speaker, Archivist Tala, keeper of the Alliance's most ancient records. She was a small, unassuming figure, her species indeterminate beneath the traditional hooded robes of her office. Speak, Archivist, San encouraged. Tala stepped forward, her movements deliberate. The archive contains records of a species quarantined from Galactic society nearly 3,000 years ago. A species with unique abilities that might be effective against the Hiveborn. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. A quarantined species? Voss asked. Why haven't I heard of this? Because knowledge of their existence is restricted to level Omega clearance, Tala replied, which, given our current invocation of Protocol Omega, is now available to this council. Admiral Zakara's brow furrowed. What species? They call themselves humans, Tala said, the unfamiliar word causing her translator to momentarily falter. Native to a planet they call Earth, in a system previously designated as Quarantine Zone 13. What makes these humans so special? Counselor Xan asked. And why were they quarantined? Tala activated a small device on her wrist, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a bipedal species with minimal external differences among individuals, unusual in galactic society, where most species exhibited dramatic physical variations. Humans were encountered during the early expansion era of the Alliance, Tala explained. Initial contact was promising. They were technologically primitive, but advancing rapidly. However, subsequent interactions revealed concerning traits. The hologram shifted to show various scenes. Humans engaged in combat, building structures, operating primitive machines. They exhibited extreme adaptability, unparalleled aggression, and a concerning tendency toward both self-destruction and rapid expansion. Tala continued. Most alarmingly, they showed an ability to improvise and innovate that defied all predictive models. That doesn't sound so different from many species we've incorporated into the Alliance, Voss observed. There's more, Tala said, her voice lowering. When faced with a crisis, humans display a unique psychological response. Rather than becoming more cautious, they become more creative, more daring. They thrive in chaos, and perhaps most importantly, she paused, looking around the room. They are one of the few known species to have successfully fought off a Hiveborn incursion. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. Impossible, shouted the Volari delegate. No species has ever repelled the Hiveborn. It was a small scouting force, not the main collective, Tala clarified. But the records show the humans not only survived but captured Hiveborn technology and began reverse engineering it immediately. That's when the quarantine decision was made. Admiral Zakara stepped closer to the hologram, studying the human figures with new interest. If they repelled a Hiveborn incursion, why quarantine them instead of recruiting them? The ethics committee determined that human psychology was too volatile, too unpredictable, Tala replied. They classified humans as a potential existential threat to stable galactic society. The quarantine was established, and all records of their existence were restricted. Voss felt a chill run down his spine. The Alliance had encountered thousands of species over its long history. For one to be deemed too dangerous to even contact. Have we monitored them since the quarantine? Counselor Xan asked. Tala nodded. Discrete long-range observations only. They've advanced considerably. They've colonized their solar system and have begun limited exploration beyond. They also experienced numerous global conflicts but survived each one with accelerated technological development. And they have no knowledge of the wider galactic community? Voss asked. None. The quarantine protocols include technology that obscures their detection of Alliance worlds and communications. A heavy silence fell over the chamber as the implications sank in. Breaking the 3,000-year quarantine was unprecedented. Contacting a species deemed too dangerous to join galactic society was an act of desperation. But they were desperate. I motioned to break the quarantine. Admiral Zakara said firmly, "If humans truly possess abilities that might help us against the Hiveborn, we cannot ignore that possibility, regardless of ancient warnings." Seconded, Voss added quickly. Counselor Xan surveyed the room, his ancient eyes unreadable. This is not a decision to be made lightly. If the archives are correct, humans could be as dangerous as the Hiveborn, merely in different ways. With respect, Counselor, Admiral Zakara replied, "We're already facing extinction. What do we have to lose?" The vote was conducted in silence, each council member registering their choice through neural interfaces. When it was complete, San announced the result. The motion passes. The quarantine on Earth will be lifted, and contact will be initiated immediately. Within hours, a special communication vessel was prepared. It would carry a message, translated into every human language the archives had record of, explaining the Alliance's situation and requesting aid against the Hiveborn. The vessel was equipped with faster-than-light communication systems that would penetrate the quarantine barriers. As the communication ship prepared to depart, Voss found himself standing beside Archivist Tilla in an observation lounge. "There's something you're not telling the Council, isn't there?" he asked quietly. Tilla remained silent for a long moment, watching as the ship's engines flared to life. The original mission that encountered humans, only one vessel returned, she finally said. Out of a fleet of 17. Voss felt his blood run cold. What happened to the others? The records are incomplete, but there are references to a human term that was recorded repeatedly during the encounter. She hesitated. They call it war. The communication ship accelerated away from Haven, carrying with it the last hope of the Alliance. As Voss watched it disappear into the darkness, he couldn't help but wonder if they were exchanging one doom for another. 3 days later, as the Unbroken Dawn patrolled Haven's outer defense perimeter, the sensors detected an anomaly. The Hiveborn fleet had changed course. They were moving faster than ever before, all units converging on a single target, Haven. Somehow, they knew. They knew the Alliance had made its final move, and they were coming to end the game before the new pieces could enter the board. Humanity unleashed. The message arrived on Earth without warning. In a hidden facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Helena Chen stared at the alien text scrolling across her screen as translation algorithms worked to decipher it. Around her, the command center of the Earth Defense Force hummed with activity as personnel tried to determine the origin of the transmission that had somehow bypassed all of their detection systems. "Translation complete," announced the AI interface. "Message authenticity confirmed. Origin: extrasolar." Chen's heart raced, but her face remained impassive. For generations, the leaders of Earth's unified military had passed down a secret: humanity was not alone in the universe. They had encountered alien visitors once, nearly 3,000 years ago. The encounter had been brief, tense, and had ended with the aliens retreating, never to return. But they had left behind a warning: stay within your solar system or face consequences. For centuries, humanity had obeyed, focusing instead on perfecting their technology, colonizing their solar system, and preparing. Always preparing. Because deep down, they knew the isolation wouldn't last forever. "Display the message," Chen ordered. The holographic display flickered to life in the center of the command room, showing the translated text. "To the species known as humans of the planet Earth, We are the Galactic Alliance, a coalition of civilizations spanning thousands of star systems. 3,000 years ago, our predecessors made contact with your world and subsequently established a quarantine zone around your solar system for reasons that are no longer relevant. We now face extinction at the hands of an enemy called the Hiveborn, a collective consciousness that has decimated our forces and overwhelmed our defenses. Our records indicate that your species may possess unique characteristics that could be effective against this threat. We request your assistance. If you are willing to aid us, follow the navigational data embedded in this transmission to reach Haven, our final stronghold. We understand if you choose not to involve yourselves in our conflict, but we had to try. This message will repeat. Silence fell over the command center. Chen replayed the message twice more before speaking. Verify the attached navigational data, she ordered. Verified, responded her second-in-command, Captain Reyes. It's comprehensive. Star charts, FTL jump coordinates, everything we'd need to navigate to their location. Chen's mind raced. For generations, humanity had wondered about that first contact, had prepared for the day when the stars would no longer be off-limits. They had built ships capable of interstellar travel, but never used them beyond the solar system. They had developed weapons technologies that had never been tested against a real enemy. Now, finally, the call had come, not as a threat, but as a plea for help. Admiral, Rice said hesitantly, this could be a trap. It could be, Chen agreed. But if it's genuine, there's an entire galactic community out there facing annihilation. She turned to the communications officer. Contact the Security Council. Emergency session. Protocol avalanche. Within hours, the leaders of Earth's unified government were gathered, and the debate raged. Some counseled caution, maintaining the isolation that had kept humanity safe. Others argued that this was humanity's moment to step onto the galactic stage. In the end, Chen's argument won the day. We've spent 3,000 years preparing for this moment, she told the council. Our ships, our weapons, our tactics, all designed with the knowledge that we weren't alone. If we don't answer this call, we may face these Hiveborn alone later, without allies. The vote was unanimous. Operation Thunderbolt was authorized. Earth would send a fleet to aid the Alliance. 48 hours later, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the EDF dreadnought Prometheus, the largest warship ever constructed by human hands. Around it gathered the First Fleet, 100 ships, the pride of Earth's defense forces, each packed with the finest technology and weaponry humanity had developed during their long isolation. All ships report ready, Admiral, announced Captain Reyes. Quantum drives spooled and synchronized. Chen looked at the faces of her bridge crew. Despite their training, she could see the excitement, the nervousness. They would be the first humans to travel beyond the solar system in recorded history. Send the fleet-wide message, she ordered. Then initiate quantum jump sequence. Her words echoed throughout the assembled ships. This is Admiral Chen. Today we break the bonds of our isolation and venture into the galaxy. We go not as conquerors, but as defenders, not just of our own world, but of all worlds threatened by extinction. Whatever we find out there, remember your training, remember your humanity. Chen out. With a flash of light that momentarily outshone the sun, the First Fleet vanished from Earth's orbit, tearing holes in space-time as they accelerated to speeds previously untested outside of simulations. The journey to Haven took 7 days by the ship's chronometers. 7 days of nervous anticipation, final drills, and tactical planning based on the limited information provided in the Alliance message. When they finally emerged from quantum space, they found chaos. Haven's star system was a battlefield. The outer defenses had already fallen, and the Hiveborn fleet, a vast swarm of biomechanical ships that moved with disturbing coordination, was closing in on the planet itself. Alliance vessels fought desperately, but they were clearly outnumbered and outmatched. Combat stations, Chen ordered calmly. Deploy in formation spearhead. All ships, weapons hot. The human fleet moved with precision, arranging themselves into an arrowhead formation with the Prometheus at its tip. Unlike the Alliance ships, which fought as individual units, the human fleet operated as a single organism, a tactic developed over centuries of war games and simulations. "Enemy fleet has detected us," reported the tactical officer. "Multiple hostile vessels altering course to intercept." "Let them come," Chen said, watching the tactical display. "Hold formation and prepare to execute maneuver Thunderclap on my mark." The Hiveborn responded exactly as she had anticipated. A portion of their fleet, nearly 200 vessels, broke away from the assault on Haven and moved to engage the newcomers. They arranged themselves in a classic envelopment pattern, clearly intending to surround and isolate the human ships. Chen allowed herself a small smile. "They think like a hive, moving as one mind. Predictable." Mark. The human fleet suddenly split apart, each ship activating pre-programmed evasive patterns that appeared random but were actually carefully calculated. The Hiveborn envelopment collapsed into confusion as their targets scattered in all directions. "All ships, execute firing pattern Alpha," Chen commanded. "Full spectrum assault." The human vessels opened fire, unleashing weapons that the galaxy hadn't seen in millennia. Quantum disruptors that targeted the Hiveborn's collective consciousness. Nanite warheads that infiltrated and reprogrammed their biomechanical systems. Gravity lances that tore apart their molecular structure. Each ship fired at precisely calculated targets, their attacks synchronized to create cascading failures throughout the Hiveborn formation. Unlike the Alliance, which had developed elegant, efficient weapons designed to disable or destroy with minimal collateral damage, human weapons were overwhelming, adaptable, and often deliberately excessive. On the planet below, Commander Eli Voss stared in disbelief at the tactical displays. The unknown fleet had appeared from nowhere and was engaging the Hiveborn with shocking effectiveness. "Are those the humans?" he asked Archivist Tela, who stood beside him in Haven's command center. "They must be," she replied, her voice filled with wonder. But this wasn't what the archives described. Their technology appears far more advanced than our projections suggested. Voss watched as one of the human vessels took a direct hit from a Hiveborn energy beam, a blow that would have vaporized an Alliance cruiser. Instead, the ship's defensive shields flared brilliantly but held. "How is that possible?" Admiral Zakara demanded, joining them at the display. "That was a concentrated anti-proton beam." "Adaptive shielding," Tela observed. "They're learning from each attack, just like the Hiveborn do." Aboard the Prometheus, Chen directed the battle with calculated precision. The first wave of Hiveborn ships had been decimated, but the main fleet was now turning its attention away from Haven. "They're adapting to our weapons," reported the tactical officer, effectiveness dropping by 20% with each volley. "As expected," Chen replied. "Switch to Phase 2 protocols. Deploy the Mavericks." From the bellies of the larger human ships, smaller craft emerged, fighter-scale vessels piloted by humans rather than AI. While the Hiveborn could predict and counter algorithmic attacks, they struggled against the controlled chaos of human intuition. The fighters darted between the massive Hiveborn vessels, exploiting weaknesses, creating openings for the larger ships to exploit. Each pilot made decisions on the fly, improvising tactics that no strategic AI would have considered viable. In the Alliance Command Center, Voss couldn't believe what he was seeing. "They're sending in manually piloted craft against Hiveborn quantum reflexes. A suicidal tactic," Admiral Zakara agreed. Yet the human fighters weren't being destroyed. They moved erratically, unpredictably, seeming to defy the laws of physics with maneuvers that would kill most species. How are their pilots surviving those G-forces? Voss wondered aloud. Tela consulted her datapad. The archives mentioned that humans evolved on a high-gravity world with significant atmospheric pressure variations. Their physiology is unusually resilient. As they watched, the tide of battle began to shift. The Hiveborn, faced with an enemy that adapted as quickly as they did and employed tactics they couldn't predict, began to falter. But then, a new signal appeared on the tactical displays. A massive Hiveborn vessel, far larger than any previously encountered, emerged from quantum space at the edge of the system. "The mothership," Zakara whispered, her voice tight with fear. "We've theorized its existence but never confirmed it. If that's truly the central node of their collective." On the Prometheus, Chen observed the new arrival with calm assessment. "Interesting. They brought out their queen bee." The Hiveborn mothership began to pulse with energy, and suddenly every Hiveborn vessel fought with renewed coordination and ferocity. The human fleet's advance stalled as the enemy adapted faster than before. "The mothership is enhancing their collective intelligence," reported the science officer. "It's analyzing our tactics in real time and distributing countermeasures." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Then we'll give it something it can't analyze. Transmit deployment authorization for the Pandora device." Captain Rice looked up sharply. "Admiral, the Pandora hasn't been field tested. The simulations suggest a 30% chance of cascading system failure." "Noted," Chen replied. "Deploy it anyway." From the Prometheus, a small, unassuming probe launched toward the Hiveborn mothership. It moved slowly, deliberately vulnerable, practically begging to be captured. And the Hiveborn took the bait. The probe was drawn into the massive mothership, disappearing into its biomechanical structure. For several minutes, nothing happened. The battle continued to rage across the system, with both human and Alliance ships now fighting a desperate holding action against the coordinated Hiveborn assault. Then, without warning, the mothership shuddered. Strange energy patterns rippled across its surface. The coordinated movements of the Hiveborn fleet faltered, their attacks becoming disjointed and erratic. "Pandora device activated," announced the tactical officer, disruption patterns spreading through the Hiveborn network. The Pandora device was humanity's most closely guarded secret weapon, a quantum-entangled chaos generator designed specifically to attack hive mind systems. It didn't destroy, it confused. It introduced subtle errors, conflicting commands, and informational paradoxes into the collective consciousness. Across the battlefield, Hiveborn ships began to fire on each other, their perfect coordination shattered by doubt and confusion. "All ships, press the advantage," Chen ordered. "Focus fire on the mothership's primary nodes." The human fleet surged forward, joined now by the remaining Alliance vessels. Together, they hammered the disoriented Hiveborn mothership with everything they had. In Haven's command center, Voss, Zakara, and Tella watched in amazement as the seemingly invincible enemy began to crumble. What did they do? Zakara wondered aloud. Tella's eyes widened with sudden understanding. The archives mentioned that humans have a unique relationship with information and logic. They value paradox, ambiguity, and even deliberate contradiction in ways most species find disturbing. It appears they've weaponized that trait. The mothership's defenses were failing now, unable to coordinate a response to the combined assault. With a final, concentrated barrage from the Prometheus, the massive vessel's core destabilized. A series of explosions rippled through its structure, and the Hiveborn flagship began to break apart. Throughout the system, the remaining Hiveborn ships went dormant, their controlling intelligence severed. The battle was over. In the aftermath, as Alliance rescue ships moved to recover survivors and assess damage, a communication channel opened between the Prometheus and Haven's command center. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the main display, calm and composed despite the battle they had just survived. "This is Admiral Helena Chen of the Earth Defense Force. The immediate threat has been neutralized, though I recommend establishing containment protocols for the inactive Hiveborn vessels. They may retain some autonomic functions." Admiral Zakara stepped forward. "Admiral Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Alliance, I thank you for your intervention. Without question, you have saved our civilization." Chen nodded acknowledgement. "We responded to your call for aid. Now, I believe we have much to discuss regarding the future." Indeed, Zakara agreed. Your quarantine was a mistake, one made from fear and lack of understanding. An understandable precaution, Chen replied diplomatically. But times have changed. Humanity is ready to join the wider galaxy, as equals and as protectors, if needed. As the communication ended, Voss turned to Archivist Taylor. The archives described humans as dangerous. Were they wrong? Tella watched the tactical display, where the human fleet was now moving into defensive positions around Haven, already preparing for the possibility of another attack. No, she said quietly. I believe the archives were quite correct. Humans are dangerous. But today, we should be grateful for that fact. Above Haven, the human ships stood vigilant, their mission accomplished but their journey just beginning. Humanity had taken its first steps into the galaxy, and the galaxy would never be the same again.